The grave candles were never given to a traitor's child unless the court wanted the dead to reject her in public. And rejection by the royal dead was not symbolic. If a grave flame turned against the hand that lit it, the blue fire would crawl beneath the skin, blacken the blood, and mark the accused for execution before dawn. So when they placed a single blue candle in Selene Mar's trembling hands and pushed her toward the royal tombs, every noble in the mourning garden understood the cruelty. She was not there to honor the fallen kings. She was there to be condemned by them. The cemetery of Alpha Kings stretched beneath the winter moon, silent and white with frost. Black stone wolves guarded each tomb, their jaws open toward the sky. Hundreds of candles burned in silver bowls along the path, each flame blue to mark loyalty, each one said to carry the final breath of the ruler buried beneath it. Tonight, the entire court had gathered for the night of graves, when the living bowed before the dead and renewed their oaths to the bloodline. Selene stood at the edge of the path in a plain black mourning dress, chosen to make her look smaller than grief. Her wrists were bare, but the shame on them felt heavier than chains. On her left cheek, just below the eye, was the faint burn scar left by the traitor's brand that had been pressed there when she was 6. Mar blood. That was what people called it when they wanted to sound polite. Traitor's blood was what they meant. Her father, Garin Mar, had been captain of the old king's guard. 15 years ago, King Osric Vale was murdered inside the Wolf Chapel, and Garin was found dead near the altar with the king's blood on his hands. The court declared him the killer before dawn. His lands were seized. His name was scraped from the honor walls. His daughter was spared only because Lord Regent Malrek called it mercy. Mercy had meant kitchen stairs, cold rooms, servants spitting when she passed, priests forcing her to carry funeral ash for families who whispered that her father's soul was too filthy to burn. Tonight, mercy had brought her to the graves. Lord Regent Malrek stood beside the royal tomb path in a mantle of white wolf fur. He was silver-haired, handsome in the severe way of men who had made cruelty look like discipline, with a gold mourning chain across his chest. He had raised Alpha King Theron after Osric's death. The kingdom praised him as loyal. Selene had learned to fear men everyone praised too loudly. "The court has long wondered," Malrek said, voice smooth as polished bone, "whether treason ends with the traitor or lives on in the blood." A murmur moved through the nobles. Selene kept her eyes on the candle. Its blue flame shook, though there was no wind. At the far end of the path, Alpha King Theron Vale watched from the steps of his father's tomb. He was tall, dark-haired, and still enough to make the entire graveyard feel as if it waited on his breathing. His black cloak fell from wolf-steel shoulders. A narrow crown of silver thorns rested on his brow. His eyes were gold, but cold, guarded, and shadowed by a grief that had been trained into command. Selene had seen him often from a distance. Never this close. Never with all the dead between them. Theron had been a child when his father was murdered. The court said Garin Mar had tried to kill the prince too, but Malrek had saved him and carried him from the chapel through fire and blood. That story had made Malrek untouchable. It had made Selene untouchable in another way. No one struck her in front of Theron. They did not need to. The name Mar did enough. Malrek gestured toward the tomb path. "Let Garin Mar's daughter light the grave candles. If the royal dead accept her flame, we will call it a mercy. If they reject it, let the court know treason has not finished speaking." A priest stepped forward with a black iron bowl. Inside it lay execution ash. Selene stared at it. Malrek smiled faintly. "If even one candle burns black against your hand, the ash will be placed over your heart before sunrise. The dead will have named you. No living voice will be needed." The court approved in whispers. "Clean. Hoy. Final." Selene lifted her head. "And if the dead do not answer the way you want?" The graveyard went still. Malrek's smile did not move. "Then perhaps your father taught you courage, if not loyalty." A few nobles laughed softly. Theron did not. His gaze had sharpened on Selene's face, not with warmth, not with mercy, but with the unsettling attention of a wolf hearing a sound beneath the snow. "Did your father teach you anything?" he asked. The question was quiet. It reached her anyway. Selene looked toward him. For one dangerous breath, she considered silence. Silence had kept her alive. Silence had taught her how to fold pain into small, hidden places. But the grave candle flickered toward her, and old anger rose with its light. "He taught me to kneel only when grief deserved it," she said. The court hissed. Malrek's eyes chilled. Theron's expression did not change, but one blue grave flame beside him leaned sharply toward Selene. Only one. She saw it. So did he. Malrek stepped forward before the moment could grow teeth. "Begin." A priest seized Selene's arm and guided her to the first tomb. It belonged to an ancient Alpha King whose name had been worn smooth by centuries. Selene lowered her candle toward the silver bowl. She expected the flame to gutter. That was what the court wanted. A blue flame dying at her touch, proof that her blood offended the dead. Instead, the grave candle bent toward her. Not away, toward. Its blue fire bowed so low, it nearly kissed the candle in her hand. A whisper moved through the nobles. Selene's breath caught. The priest stiffened. Again, they brought her to the next tomb. The flame bowed, then the next, and the next. One by one, every grave candle along the royal path leaned toward Selene Mar, Traitor's daughter, as if the dead kings were lowering their heads before her. Malrek's face tightened. Not anger, fear. It flashed across him nakedly for half a breath, stripping away the calm regent, the loyal guardian, the man who had spent 15 years wearing the kingdom's trust-like armor. Then he looked toward King Osric's tomb, and Selene saw terror, real terror, the kind that did not fear scandal, the kind that feared the dead remembering. Theron descended one step from his father's tomb. The graveyard wind shifted. Selene reached the final tomb, King Osric Vale, Theron's father. The silver bowl before the tomb was empty. No flame, no candle, no blue loyalty, only black ash. Selene looked up. Why is his grave unlit? No one answered. Malrek's voice cut too quickly through the silence. Because a murdered king's flame does not burn until justice is complete. Selene stared at the ash. Her candle flame trembled violently. Then it turned black. The court recoiled. Malrek's hand moved toward the sword at his side. There, the traitor's blood reveals itself. But the black flame did not strike Selene. It rose from her candle, thin and dark as a blade, then leapt into the empty bowl on Osric's tomb. The ash inside ignited. A black grave candle formed from nothing, taller than all the blue flames around it. Theron went utterly still. The black flame bent. Not toward Selene, not toward the king, toward Lord Regent Malrek. Every grave candle in the cemetery bowed lower. Then the black fire stretched across the frost like a living finger and touched Malrek's shadow. His shadow lengthened violently. It dragged behind him across the snow, far longer than his body, twisting toward Osric's tomb as if something dead had caught it by the throat. Malrek staggered back, and for the first time, the loyal regent made a sound that was almost a gasp. The black flame split into letters over the tomb. A name burned there. Not Osric's, not Selene's. Garen Mar. The name that had been scraped from the honor walls blazed in black fire above the murdered king's grave. The dead wolves carved on the tombs opened their stone mouths. And from King Osric's grave, a voice whispered through the black flame. The traitor died, protecting my son. The dead had spoken, and no one in the mourning garden knew where to put their fear. The name, Garen Mar, burned above King Osric's tomb in black flame, bright enough to stain the frost like ink. Every blue grave candle remained bowed toward Selene. Their flames bent so low that the silver bowls trembled on their stone stands. The carved wolves along the royal tombs held their mouths open, and from each hollow jaw came the faintest sound of breath. Not wind, waiting. Selene stood with the candle still in her hand. Though its flame had gone black from base to tip, she expected pain. She expected the fire to crawl into her skin, blacken her blood, and mark her for death the way Malrek had promised. Instead, the flame leaned toward her like a wolf lowering its head. Across the path, Lord Regent Malrek stared at his own stretched shadow. It lay across the snow unnaturally long, pulled toward Osric's tomb by the black fire. For the first time in Selene's memory, the regent did not look like a man in control of the room. He looked like someone who had heard a locked door open behind him. Then his fear vanished behind fury. "Extinguish it," he ordered. No priest moved. Malrek turned sharply. Extinguish that flame. One of the grave priests stumbled forward with a bowl of burial salt. He cast the white grains toward Osric's tomb. The salt never reached the fire. It turned black in midair and fell as ash at Selene's feet. A sound moved through the court. Theron descended the final steps from his father's tomb. His eyes were fixed on the burning name above the grave. Garin Mar, the traitor whose daughter had scrubbed floors in the palace for 15 years. The man Theron had been taught to hate before he even understood what murder meant. The traitor died protecting my son, Theron repeated. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. Malrek turned toward him at once. Your Majesty, do not give shape to grave echoes. Funeral fire is easily corrupted by bloodlines trained in death magic. Selene looked at him. Trained? She asked. I was 6 when you branded my cheek. The words cut through the graveyard. A few nobles looked away. Malrek's jaw tightened. Your father's line served the funeral rites. Grave, flame blood was always unstable. It remembers loyalty incorrectly. The black candle flared. Malrek flinched before he could stop himself. Theron saw it. So did Selene. The Alpha King stepped closer to the tomb. What is grave? Flame. Malrek's face went still. A priest answered before the regent could silence him. An old funeral bloodline, Your Majesty. They were once allowed to read the final loyalty of the dead through grave fire. Their testimony settled disputed murders before the royal court forbade the practice. Theron's gaze moved slowly to Malrek. Why was it forbidden? Malrek smiled without warmth. Because the dead are not judges. They are grief wearing memory. The black flame bent lower toward his shadow. This time, the shadow did not merely stretch. It opened. A thin split appeared down the center of the darkness on the snow, as if something beneath Malrek's feet had been cut with an invisible knife. Inside that split flickered a scene. Red chapel light, a fallen crown, a child's hand reaching through smoke. Theron staggered back half a step. Selene saw his face change. Not recognition. Pain before memory. Malrek slammed his boot onto his own shadow. The vision vanished. The black flame hissed. Enough, Malrek said. The girl has awakened a forbidden grave rite during a royal mourning ceremony. By old law, she should be seized before the dead spread madness through the court. 2 guards moved toward Selene. Theron's voice stopped them. No. The guards froze. Malrek looked at him carefully. Your Majesty, I said no. She is dangerous. So is whatever you are trying to stop me from seeing. A murmur broke through the court. Malrek's expression hardened. I raised you from the ashes of your father's murder. Theron's jaw flexed. I know. I held the kingdom together when wolves were ready to tear your crown from your child. Hands. I know. I gave you truth when grief would have swallowed you. Theron looked at the black candle. Did you? The question landed like a blade drawn in public. Malrek's face paled, then settled into wounded dignity. It was a beautiful mask. Selene understood why the court trusted it. Men like Malrek did not need innocence when they could perform betrayal well enough. He turned to the nobles. You hear him. A king poisoned by a traitor's daughter before his father's grave. Selene's grip tightened around the candle. She expected the old shame to rise. It did, but something else rose with it. The black flame in her hand warmed, not burning, not gentle. It seemed to ask a question without words. Not who accused you. Who died loyal? Selene looked at Osric's tomb. If my father protected him, show me. Malrek's eyes flashed. Do not answer her. The grave candles answered anyway. Every blue flame in the cemetery went still. Then one by one, they lifted from their bowls and drifted into the air, hundreds of small blue lights forming a path from Osric's tomb to the old wolf chapel beyond the graveyard wall. Theron stared at the chapel, the place where his father had died, the place he had not entered in 15 years. Selene felt the black candle tug in her hand, pulling her toward that path. A priest whispered, "The dead are calling witness." Malrek drew his sword. The sound of steel against scabbard cut through the night. This ends now. Theron turned. So quick to draw against a candle? Malrek's eyes darkened. Against the girl holding it. The black flames snapped high. Selene's candle broke in half. She gasped as the fire leapt from the wax and wrapped around her wrist like a bracelet of dark light. Not a shackle. Not yet. A mark. The blue grave candles began to circle her, and in each flame she saw a final breath. Kings dying in battle, queens whispering oaths, guards falling with doors barred behind them. Then she saw one flame brighter than the rest. Her father, Garin Mar, stood in its heart, blood on his armor, one arm wrapped around a small boy with gold eyes. He was running through smoke. Theron. Selene lifted her other hand toward the vision. The black fire tightened. Her father's voice came through the flame, rough and urgent. Do not let Malrek take the prince to the west door. Theron stopped breathing. Malrek lunged. Not toward Selene's heart. Toward her wrist, where the black flame held the memory. Theron moved first. He caught Malrek's blade against his own, steel ringing between the tombs. The entire court recoiled. Alpha King and Regent stood locked before the grave of the murdered king, while Selene Mar, Traitor's daughter, held the dead memory between them. The blue flames pointed toward the wolf chapel. The black flame pointed at Malrek. And from inside Selene's burning wrist, Garin Mar whispered one more command. Ask him what he did to the child's memories. Garin Mar's voice faded into the black flame, but the command did not. It remained in the graveyard like a blade suspended between breath and blood. Theron's sword was still locked against Malrek's. The regent's face had gone pale beneath the winter moon, yet his grip remained steady. That frightened Selene more than open panic would have. Men who could stay calm before the dead had either trained themselves well or buried too many bodies to fear one more. Theron's voice was low. What did you do to my memories? Malrek's mouth tightened. I saved them. The black flame around Selene's wrist hissed. Theron pressed his blade harder. That is not an answer. It is the only one a child, king could survive. The court shifted uneasily. Selene felt the grave fire listening. Malrek turned his head slightly, enough for the nobles to hear him. King Osric was butchered in the wolf chapel. The prince was found soaked in his father's blood, half mad from terror. Garin Mar stood over them both. You think I should have let a child remember that? The words sounded almost merciful. Almost. Then the black flame crawled higher around Selene's wrist and opened another memory. The graveyard vanished. Smoke filled the air. Selene saw the wolf chapel as it had been 15 years ago. Black pillars, silver altar, moonlight shattered across the floor. King Osric lay dying at the base of the altar, one hand pressed to his torn chest. A young Theron, no older than 7, crouched beside him, trembling and silent with shock. Garin Mar stood between the boy and 3 masked attackers, not attacking the king, protecting the prince. His sword was broken, his armor was split. Blood poured from his shoulder, but he still held the west door shut with his body while men outside tried to force it open. Then Malrek entered from the east. Younger, unwounded, calm. In his hand burned a white funeral candle. Garin turned toward him, relief flashing across his face. Take the prince through the north crypt, not the west door. They are waiting there. Malrek looked at the dying king, then at the child, then at Garin. I know. The memory flickered. Theron made a sound like breath, leaving a wound. Selene staggered as the flame pulled the vision deeper. Young Theron reached for Malrek. Help my father. Malrek knelt before him and touched the white candle to the boy's brow. No, little king, he whispered. Help me remember this correctly. The flame went white. Theron screamed. The memory shattered. Selene fell to one knee in the snow, clutching her burning wrist. The blue grave candles circled faster around her, their flames bending toward the wolf chapel path. Her father's final loyalty still burned in the black fire, but now another truth had joined it. Theron's memories had not been damaged by grief. They had been edited. The Alpha King lowered his sword. For one heartbeat, Selene thought he was yielding. Then she saw his face. It was not surrender. It was horror held so tightly it had become stillness. You touched my mind, he said. Malrek's expression shifted again into grief. Perfect grief. Practiced grief. I removed trauma that would have broken you. You made me hate the man who carried me through smoke. I made you able to rule. You made me yours. The words struck the graveyard harder than the clash of steel. Malrek's eyes flashed. There, beneath the loyal guardian, beneath the wounded father figure, Selene saw the truth. Possession. Theron had not been raised. He had been shaped. The regent lifted his chin. I made you king. The black flame lashed from Selene's wrist to Osric's tomb. The name Theron Mar burned brighter. Then another name appeared beneath it. Theron Vale. Not in black. In blue. The graveyard gasped. A living name should not burn on a tomb. Theron stared at it, face draining of color. Why is my name there? Malrek looked genuinely afraid now. The black flame answered by splitting the frost before Osric's grave. Under the snow, hidden beneath stone dust and old mourning flowers, lay a thin silver plate carved with tiny runes. Selene reached for it. Malrek snapped. Do not touch that. She touched it. The plate burned cold beneath her fingers, and a new vision opened. A funeral rite. Young Theron kneeling before his father's sealed tomb. Malrek standing behind him. Priests in gray robes holding blue grave candles around the boy in a tight circle. One priest whispered, "A living memory cannot be buried under a dead king's flame. It may not hold." Malrek answered, "Then bind it to loyalty. Let him love me every time he reaches for the truth." Selene's stomach turned. The priests lowered their candles. Blue flame entered the child's shadow. Young Theron's eyes went empty. The vision vanished. The silver plate cracked in Selene's hand. Theron did not move. The entire court waited for rage. But when he spoke, his voice was almost soft. "You buried my memory in my father's grave." Malrek stepped toward him. "I buried your pain. You buried my witness. I protected the crown. You protected yourself." The grave candles flared. Every blue flame bent toward Theron, now not bowing, but grieving. Selene felt it through the grave flame around her wrist. The dead kings had not been silent because they approved the lie. They had been sealed beneath a mourning rite, twisted into a cage. Malrek saw the flames turning and acted. He seized Selene by the throat. The court shouted. Theron moved, but Malrek dragged her in front of him, a dagger appearing against the pulse beneath her jaw. The black flame around her wrist surged, but Malrek pressed the blade harder. "Careful," he said. "If grave, flame blood spills on royal tomb soil before a rite is complete, every dead king wakes hungry." Selene even still. Theron stopped. Their eyes met over the dagger. His gold gaze was wild now, not with loss of control, but with the terror of a man realizing the person who could free his past might die before his hand could reach her. Malrek smiled against her hair. "There is the boy I raised. Afraid, obedient, mine." Selene could barely breathe. Still, she forced one word out. "No." The black flame tightened around her wrist. Not burning her. Answering her. She lifted the broken silver plate in her shaking hand and pressed it against Malrek's arm. The regent screamed. Blue fire burst beneath his skin, revealing a hidden mourning mark carved into his flesh, the same rune that had sealed Theron's memories. Theron saw it. The grave candles saw it. The dead saw it. Malrek shoved Selene away and staggered back, clutching his burning arm. The black flame rose from Selene's wrist, stretched into the shape of a wolf's open jaws, and pointed toward the wolf chapel. From inside the chapel, King Osric's voice whispered again, "Bring my son to the place where he forgot me." The chapel doors, sealed for 15 years, opened by themselves, and every grave candle flew inside. The wolf chapel had been sealed with mourning iron for 15 years. When its doors opened, the graveyard forgot how to breathe. Every blue candle flew inside before any living person moved, streaking through the air like souls returning to a place that had denied them entrance. Their flames lit the chapel in strips of cold fire, black stone pillars, a cracked silver altar, old bloodstains beneath layers of sacred ash, wolf statues with blind gemstone eyes, and the west door where Theron Mar had died, holding back the killers. Selene stood at the threshold with her throat bruised from Malrek's hand, and the black, grave flame still circling her wrist. Theron stopped beside her. He did not enter at once. His face was unreadable, but Selene saw the way his hand tightened around his sword. This was not only the place where his father had died. It was the room where his own memory had been stolen and replaced with loyalty to the man who murdered his past. "You do not have to go in," Selene said. His eyes lowered to her. For a moment, the grave fire softened every hard edge of him. "Neither do you." Her throat ached when she swallowed. "My father died in there." So did mine. The words should have separated them. Instead, they stood between them like a bridge made of grief. Malrek's laugh came from behind them. He was guarded now, two soldiers holding him, his burned arm marked with the exposed mourning rune. Still, he smiled. Go on then, he said. Let the dead show you pieces. Memory is a broken blade. Hold it wrong, and it cuts the living deeper than the guilty. Theron did not answer. He stepped into the chapel. Selene followed. The moment their feet crossed the threshold, the doors slammed shut behind them. The court cried out outside. Inside, the candles arranged themselves in a circle around the altar. The black flame on Selene's wrist rose higher, pulling toward the west door. Blue flames gathered at Theron's shadow, not touching him, but outlining the shape of a smaller boy inside the man. Then King Osric's voice filled the chapel. Somme. Theron went still. A flame rose from the cracked altar. Not blue, not black, gold. Inside it stood the image of King Osric Vale, broad-shouldered, crowned in battle silver, one hand pressed to the fatal wound in his chest. He was not whole. Grave memory never gave the dead back gently. His outline flickered with smoke and old pain, but his eyes were clear when they found Theron. Theron's breath caught. The Alpha King looked, for one heartbeat, like the child who had reached for his father and been taught to remember a lie. Father, he whispered. The gold flame trembled. Osric turned his gaze to Selene. Garen's child. Selene's knees nearly failed. No one in the court had called her that without hatred. In the dead king's mouth, it sounded like honor. My father was loyal? She asked. Osric's face tightened. Loyal past death. The chapel floor ignited in memory. Selene saw it clearly now. Osric bleeding beside the altar. Garen Mar standing over young Theron with a broken sword, fighting three masked men back from the west door. Malrek entered from the east, white candle in hand, not with panic but timing. One masked attacker lowered his blade to him in acknowledgement. Theron saw it too. His voice changed. You knew them. The memory. Malrek smiled faintly at the attackers. Leave the prince. The dead king will be enough. Garen turned, horror breaking across his bloodied face. Malrek? The white candle flared. Young Theron screamed. The vision shattered before the killing blow. Theron staggered. Selene caught his arm without thinking. He looked down at her hand on him, and something dangerous moved between them. Grief, rage, the shock of being steadied by the daughter of the man he had been taught to hate. Outside the chapel doors, Malrek shouted, Do not trust grave fire, it shows what it hungers for. The gold flame of Osric dimmed. Selene felt the black fire tighten around her wrist. The chapel wanted the final loyalty read. But it needed blood. Her blood. She understood before the flame told her. Grave flame heirs did not command the dead without cost. They opened the final breath by giving the living one in return. Not death, not always, but pain. Memory. Truth entering the body like a blade. Theron saw her face. What does it want? Selene almost lied. She was used to protecting herself with silence. But tonight, silence had served Malrek too well. My blood on the altar, she said. No. The word came too quickly. She looked at him. You asked the dead for truth. I did not ask them to take from you. They already took my father. His jaw clenched. She stepped toward the altar. Theron caught her wrist, careful not to touch the black flame. Selene. Her name in his mouth startled her. Not Mar, not Traitor's daughter. Selene. His voice was low and rough. If this hurts you, it will. His eyes darkened. She pulled free gently. Let it matter then. She pressed her palm to the cracked silver altar. The black, grave flame sank into her skin. Pain tore through her hand, up her arm, into her chest. Selene cried out, but she did not pull away. The altar drank one drop of her blood, and the chapel exploded into the final memory. Garen Mar stood at the west door, dying but unbent, young Theron hidden behind him. King Osric lay bleeding near the altar. Malrek approached with the white candle. Move, Malrek said. Garen spat blood. You killed him. I saved the kingdom from a king who would have named you regent over me. You mean he found out? Malrek's face hardened. Garen looked down at young Theron and shoved something into the boy's small hand. A wolf-shaped grave token. Remember who carried you, Garen whispered. Then Malrek drove a blade into Garen's back. Young Theron screamed. The white candle touched his brow. The memory bent. Malrek's voice entered the boy's mind like poison. Garen killed your father. Garen tried to kill you. I saved you. Love me for surviving. The vision ended. Theron stood frozen in the candle circle. Then, slowly, he opened his right hand. A tiny wolf-shaped grave token appeared in his palm. Silver-black with age, buried in his flesh by memory magic for 15 years. Selene stared at it through tears. Theron looked at her, then at the chapel doors. His voice was no longer cold. It was worse. It was awake. Open the doors. The wolf statues obeyed. The chapel doors flew outward. Outside, the entire court saw Alpha King Theron emerge with Garen Mar's grave token in his hand, Selene beside him with grave flame burning in her blood, and the dead king's gold fire behind them. Malrek's face emptied of color. Theron lifted the token for all to see. Then every grave candle in the royal cemetery turned black, not toward Selene, toward the regent who had raised him. Every grave candle in the royal cemetery turned black. Not one, not ten, all of them. Hundreds of blue flames darkened at once, bending away from the tombs they had guarded for generations and pointing across the frost toward Lord Regent Malrek. The cemetery became a field of black fire. The nobles screamed and stumbled backward. Priests dropped their silver bowls. Guards who had obeyed Malrek for half their lives now stared at him, as if seeing a stranger wearing a loyal man's face. Malrek stood at the center of it all, pale beneath the moon, his burned arm marked with the exposed mourning rune, 2 soldiers still holding him. Then the black flames pulled his shadow open. It stretched across the snow, long and thin, trembling as though hooked by invisible claws. Inside it, the graveyard saw the wolf chapel again. Not fragments now, not broken memory. The whole truth. King Osric lay dying at the altar. Garen Mar stood between young Theron and the west door. Malrek entered with the white funeral candle. 3 masked killers knelt when they saw him. One removed his mask, Lord Halev of Thornridge. Another, Priest Vare of the Mourning House. The third, Malrek's own brother, wearing the old regent's ring. The court gasped as names hidden for 15 years burned in black letters across the snow. Malrek twisted against the soldiers. Lies. The grave candles hissed. His shadow screamed. The word lies split open beneath his feet, and another memory rose. Malrek stood beside Osric days before the murder, arguing in the wolf chapel. You would make Garen regent over me? Younger Malrek demanded. Osric's voice was tired. I would make a loyal man guardian over my son. I raised armies for you, and Garen stood between my child and every knife in this court. The memory shifted. Malrek's face hardened with the kind of rage that learns to kneel until it can stab from below. The vision vanished. Theron descended the chapel steps slowly. Selene stood beside him, the grave flame burning beneath her skin, her palm still bleeding from the altar. She felt weak enough to fall, but she refused to bend. Her father's name burned above Osric's tomb. For the first time since she was 6, it burned clean. Theron lifted the wolf-shaped grave token. Garen Mar died protecting me, he said. No one answered. No one could. The dead had already spoken. Malrek's expression changed then. The wounded loyalty vanished. The grief vanished. The guardian's mask fell away, and beneath it stood a man who had loved power long enough to mistake possession for duty. I built your reign, he said. Theron's eyes were gold and merciless. You buried my father's killer. I buried a weak king's mistake. A shocked silence passed through the cemetery. Malrek smiled, and there was blood on his teeth, where he had bitten his own tongue fighting the grave fire. Osric would have handed the kingdom to a guard captain because he trusted loyalty more than blood. Garen would have ruled through you. I stopped him. You murdered my father. I saved your throne. You stole my memories. I gave you a childhood that did not end screaming. Theron stepped closer. No, you gave yourself a king who loved his cage. The words struck Malrek harder than any blade. Selene felt the grave flame pulse around her wrist. It wanted more. Not death. Not yet. Final loyalty. She looked at the black candles, then at Theron. The rite is not finished. Theron turned to her at once. Concern flashed through his fury. What does it need? The answer rose through the fire before she could stop it. The living oath of the one he betrayed. Every eye moved to Theron. Malrek laughed. Careful, your majesty. Grave, flame, rights bind kings as easily as traitors. Give her your oath, and every dead ruler in this ground will have claim over your crown. Theron did not look away from Selene. What oath? Selene's throat tightened. She could feel the shape of it in the flame. Not an oath to her, not an oath of romance or possession. The dead did not want a king's desire. They wanted his witness. Swear you will let the final memory stand, she said, even if it breaks your court. A murmur moved through the nobles. Malrek seized it. There, she says it herself. Break the court, break the crown, break the kingdom, because a traitor's daughter holds a pretty flame. Theron raised his hand. The cemetery went silent. Then he placed the wolf-shaped grave token in Selene's palm. It was warm from his blood. I swear, he said, by my father's grave, by the memory stolen from me, and by the man I was taught to hate, that the final truth will stand. The grave token flashed black-blue. Selene's bleeding palm closed around it. The cemetery changed. The tombs opened their mouths. Not the stone wolves, the tombs themselves. Every royal grave released a line of fire into the sky, black at the root, blue at the heart. The flames braided together above King Osric's tomb and formed the outline of a throne made of funeral light. Inside it sat no king, only a child, young Theron, 7 years old, shaking, holding Garen's grave token in both hands. Malrek's memory magic wrapped around him like white smoke. Selene stepped forward, though pain clawed through her arm. Theron moved with her. Together, they entered the flame-thrown vision. The cemetery vanished. They stood inside the buried memory. Young Theron looked up at them, eyes wide and gold. Selene knelt first. She did not know why until she saw the child flinch from Theron's crown, from the shape of kings, from every adult who had rewritten his fear. I am Selene, she said softly, Garen Mar's daughter. The boy stared at her. He killed my father. No, she said, and her voice broke on the word. He carried you. Young Theron looked at the token in his hands. Then why do I remember blood on his hands? Adult Theron answered, voice rough. Because Malrek put it there. The boy looked at him then. Recognition moved slowly across the child's face. You are me. Theron's jaw tightened. Yes. Did we become cruel? The question cut deeper than any accusation. Theron closed his eyes. Selene felt his pain, as if the grave fire carried it through the air between them. When he opened his eyes, he did not lie to the child he had been. Sometimes. Young Theron's face crumpled. Adult Theron knelt before him, but not tonight. The white smoke around the boy thickened, trying to swallow the memory again. Selene lifted the black flame from her wrist and touched it to the grave token. Garen's voice filled the vision. Remember who carried you. The smoke tore. Young Theron screamed not in terror now, but release. The buried memory burst open. Garen Mar, bleeding and dying, lifted the boy into his arms and ran through the north crypt while the wolf chapel burned behind them. He shielded Theron from arrows. He took a blade across his back at the crypt door. He pressed the grave token into the child's hands and whispered, Your father loved you. Live long enough to know why. The vision shattered. Selene and Theron returned to the cemetery. Every noble had seen it. Every soldier. Every priest. Malrek stood alone beneath the black flames, his shadow pinned open, his crimes written across the frost. Theron Rose. He looked not at Selene first, though she felt his attention like heat. He looked at the court. Garen Mar is restored to royal honor, he said. His daughter is no traitor's blood. Malrek whispered, You cannot undo 15 years with one flame. Theron turned to him. No, he said, but I can begin with yours. The black grave candles bent toward Malrek's chest, and the gold mourning chain he wore began to melt. The gold mourning chain melted against Malrek's chest. For 15 years, that chain had marked him as the kingdom's faithful guardian. It had been placed around his neck at King Osric's funeral, before the nobles, before the priests, before the child king whose memories he had already begun to bury. Every year during the Night of Graves, Malrek had touched it while speaking of loyalty. Every year the court had lowered its head. Now the chain ran like molten sunlight over his white fur mantle. Malrek screamed, not because it burned his skin, because the chain was remembering what had been sworn into it. The black grave candles bent lower. The melted gold slid from Malrek's chest to the frost and formed words at his feet. I will guard the king's son as I guarded the king. Theron read the oath aloud. His voice did not shake. Malrek sank to one knee, clutching at the ruined chain. I did guard you. The black flame snapped. The oath words broke apart and reformed. I will guard the king's son from the hand that killed his father. The cemetery went silent. Selene felt the grave flame pulse through the wolf-shaped token in her palm. The dead were not finished. They had not wanted only memory. They wanted the oath Malrek had used as armor to become the blade at his throat. Theron looked at him. You swore to protect me from my father's killer. Malrek's face hardened. For a heartbeat, Selene thought he would deny it. Instead, he smiled. A small, ruined smile. And I did, he said. I protected you from becoming your father. The court recoiled. Theron stepped forward, but Selene caught his sleeve. The movement was small, instinctive, almost nothing. Still, he stopped for her. Malrek saw it. His eyes moved from Selene's hand to Theron's face, and something ugly brightened there. There it is, he whispered. Grave. Flame has always been a seduction disguised as truth. First, her father tried to put himself between the crown and its lawful regent. Now his daughter puts her hand on a king's sleeve, and suddenly the dead speak whatever she needs them to say. Selene released Theron at once. The old shame rose fast. Too fast. The court had spent years teaching her that any closeness she touched became contamination. A glance was manipulation. A word was treason. A breath was inherited guilt. Theron turned his head toward her. Do not let him make your hand a crime. The words were low, meant for her, but in the graveyard silence they carried. Selene looked at him. The black flame around her wrist steadied. Malrek's smile vanished. Theron faced the court. No one here will call witness seduction because the witness is a woman you spent 15 years forcing into silence. A murmur passed through the nobles. Not all approval. Some fear, some anger, but the words had struck something that could not be buried again. Malrek rose unsteadily. You think they will follow you after this? You restore Garen Mar, condemn the regent, and let a forbidden funeral bloodline stand beside your throne? Half the houses will say you are bewitched before dawn. Then half the houses will need better courage, Theron said. The black grave candles lifted higher. Selene felt the next pull before it came. The grave flame wanted Malrek's final loyalty read. Not the oath he spoke, the loyalty he died serving. Her stomach tightened. Theron, she said. His gaze moved to her immediately. The sound of his name from her mouth seemed to affect him more than the black flames did. But he did not soften too much. He was learning, even now, to stand beside her grief without taking it over. What is it? If I read him fully, it may not only show murder. Malrek laughed. Listen to her. Even she fears what her blood will open. Selene ignored him. It may show everyone who helped him. The cemetery changed at once. Nobles shifted. Priests looked toward one another. Several guards lowered their eyes. Theron noticed. So did Malrek. And then the regent lunged not toward Selene, not toward Theron, but toward King Osric's tomb. He slammed his bleeding palm against the black candle. Then let the dead choke on all of us. The black flame went out. For one breath, the whole graveyard became dark. Then every royal tomb cracked. Blue fire burst from beneath the stones, wild and furious. The carved wolves screamed. Frost exploded from the path. Graves that had slept for centuries opened their stone mouths too wide, and the air filled with voices not clear witness now, but hunger. Malrek had not silenced the dead. He had wounded the right. A priest shrieked. He broke the mourning seal. The graveyard shook. From the oldest tombs came shapes of blue fire. Dead wolves, half-formed kings, old guardians with hollow eyes. They rose not as gentle witnesses, but as loyal dead dragged from rest before truth was complete. Selene staggered. Pain tore through her chest. Theron caught her by the arm. Selene, the right is bleeding, she gasped. He broke the grave path. Malrek backed away. smiling through terror. Now let your dead kings judge everything. Let them decide who is loyal and who is meat. The first dead wolf lunged toward a noble. Theron moved to strike, but Selene knew steel would not stop grave hunger. She stepped in front of him. The dead wolf froze inches from her face, jaws made of blue fire open around her breath. The entire court held still. Selene raised the wolf-shaped token in her bleeding hand. "My father died protecting the living from this," she whispered. The black flame returned not from Osric's tomb, but from her palm. It spread through her fingers, up her wrist, into the burn scar on her cheek. For the first time, the traitor's brand did not ache like shame. It opened. A small, black-blue flame bloomed beneath her left eye. Malrek went still. "No," he breathed. Theron looked at her scar, and his expression changed with sudden understanding. That was not a traitor's brand. Selene could barely speak through the fire in her throat. It was a seal. The grave flame bloodline had not been only readers of funeral fire. They were keepers. Her father had sealed the hungry dead away the night he saved Theron. The court had branded Selene with the same mark, thinking it punishment, never knowing Garin Mar had passed the last grave flame seal to his child before dying. The dead wolf bowed. Not to Theron, to Selene. Then every grave flame in the cemetery bent toward her again. Malrek's terror returned naked and complete. Selene lifted her marked face to the open tombs. "Rest," she said. The word left her like blood. The dead wolves lowered their heads. One by one, the old king's flames withdrew from the air, returning to their tombs, but not before each flame cast one final shadow across the snow. Names appeared. Halev of Thornridge, Priest Vare of the Mourning House, Lord Caldron, Lady Myra, Captain Othric. Every accomplice to Osric's murder burned black on the frost. The court erupted. Malrek tried to run. Theron did not chase him. He simply looked at the grave path. The dead wolves answered. Blue fire rose in a circle around Malrek, trapping him before Osric's tomb. Selene Suayet. Theron caught her before she fell, one arm around her waist, his other hand still holding his sword. This time, when the court saw him hold her, she did not pull away. She was too tired. And some part of her, wounded and furious and alive, did not want to. Theron's voice lowered near her ear. "Tell me how to finish it." Selene looked at Malrek, at the burning names, at the black flame waiting on Osric's grave. "The dead do not need him dead yet," she whispered. Malrek heard. His face went gray. Selene lifted the grave token. "They need him to confess where he buried the rest of your memories." Theron went still against her. Malrek's eyes flicked toward the wolf chapel. Not the altar, not the west door. Beneath it, the black flame saw. The ground beneath the chapel split open, and far below, in a hidden crypt, hundreds of white funeral candles began to wake. The ground beneath the wolf chapel split open, not wide enough to swallow the living, wide enough to reveal what the living had buried. A stairway descended under the cracked altar, carved from black stone and lined with white funeral candles. One by one, the candles woke as the earth opened, their pale flames shivering like frightened eyes. Hundreds of them burned in the hidden dark beneath the chapel, far more than any royal mourning rite should have required. Selene felt Theron gå still beside her. His arm remained around her waist, steadying her. She should have pulled away. The court was watching. The nobles were already sharpening shame into whispers, but the grave flame seal beneath her eye still burned, and her legs trembled from the right. Pride could keep a woman standing for only so long before blood demanded honesty. So she let the Alpha King hold her. For now, Malrek stared at the open stairway, his face drained of all color. "Theron sa, what is beneath my father's chapel?" Malrek said nothing. The blue fire circle tightened around him. Selene lifted Garen's grave token. The black flame curled over its wolf-shaped edge, pointing downward into the hidden crypt. "Not what?" she said softly. "Who?" Theron's gaze moved to her. The word cost him something. Still, he did not hesitate. "Bring him." The guards dragged Malrek forward, but the regent stumbled before the first step, as if the air below had struck him. The white candles in the stairwell bent away from him, not bowing, recoiling. Selene understood before any priest spoke. "These are memory candles." One old grave priest shook his head. trembling. Forbidden after the first morning wars, they hold pieces of living memory cut from the mind before death. No royal court should have used them. Theron's hand tightened on his sword. Yet mine did. No one answered. They descended. The hidden crypt was round, cold, and impossibly still. White funeral candles covered every wall, each flame trapped behind a thin pane of glass. Beneath every candle was a name scratched into silver. Some belonged to dead guards, some to old servants, some to priests who had disappeared after Osric's murder. At the center of the crypt stood a tall iron candelabrum, shaped like a leafless tree. Its branches held 7 white candles. Each one bore Theron's name. Selene heard his breath change. Not loudly, but enough. Malrek spoke at last, voice hoarse. I did what I had to do. Theron turned toward him. You cut 7 memories out of me. I removed 7 wounds. You removed 7 witnesses. The candles answered. Their white flames flared, and the first pane of glass cracked. A memory spilled into the crypt. Young Theron, small and shaking, hiding behind Garin Mar in the wolf chapel. Garin shoved the grave token into his palm and whispered, If the fire turns black, trust my daughter. Selene stopped breathing. My daughter. Her father had known she might one day stand before this flame. The memory shifted. Malrek's white candle touched the child's brow. The scene vanished into smoke. The first candle went out. Theron stared at the empty wick. Selene saw the wound open in his face. Not only grief, theft, a life with pieces missing finally seeing the shape of the holes. The second candle cracked. Young Theron in a corridor after the murder, sobbing into Garin's bloodied cloak, while Garin carried him through smoke. Your father loved you, Garin gasped. Do not let them make his death into a throne for liars. White fire swallowed the memory. The second candle died. Malrek's jaw clenched. The third candle cracked. This memory was different. Theron, older by a few months, refusing to eat, refusing to speak, staring at the wolf chapel doors. Malrek knelt before him, voice gentle. Every time you remember Garin's face, you will feel gratitude for me, instead. The white candle touched the child's temple. Young Theron smiled at Malrek through empty eyes. Adult Theron made a sound so low it almost became a growl. Selene stepped closer, not touching him this time, only standing where he could see she had not turned away. The fourth candle burst. A memory of Selene. She was 6, kneeling in the courtyard, while the traitor's brand was pressed beneath her eye. Young Theron stood at a balcony, watching, his face twisted in horror. He tried to run toward her. Malrek caught his shoulder. Do not pity Mar, blood, the regent said. Her pain is the price of your survival. White fire touched young Theron's eyes. His horror became coldness. Selene's hand rose unconsciously to the mark on her cheek. Theron looked at her. The apology in his face was so raw she had to look away. The 5th and 6th candles broke together. Battles, councils, nights when Theron questioned why Malrek's version of the murder never fit the shadows in his dreams. Each time, the white funeral flame took doubt and replaced it with obedience. Every stolen memory became another brick in the loyal guardian's wall. Then only the 7th candle remained. It burned brighter than the rest. Malrek began to struggle. No. The grave flame around Selene's wrist turned black-blue. Theron looked at her. What is in that one? Selene listened. The flame did not speak in words. It spoke in dread. The first memory he took, she whispered. Malrek ripped free of one guard and lunged for the iron tree. Theron caught him by the back of his mantle and threw him to the stone floor. The 7th candle cracked. The crypt vanished. Young Theron stood in the wolf chapel before the murder began. King Osric knelt before him, alive, one hand on his son's shoulder. Beside him stood Garin Mar. Osric said, If anything happens to me, Garin guards you, not Malrek. Young Theron frowned. But Uncle Malrek says he loves me. Osric's face darkened. Love that needs your obedience is not love, son. The memory shifted. A shadow moved behind the chapel screen. Malrek listening. The final candle shattered. Theron staggered as the lost truth struck him. Selene caught his arm. This time, he did not merely accept the support. He held onto her hand. Above them, in the graveyard, every black candle flared. King Osric's voice rolled through the crypt and the open chapel. Malrek killed me before I could name Garen guardian. The white memory candles went out, all except one. A hidden flame beneath the iron tree opened, small and red. Selene frowned. That is not yours. Malrek laughed weakly from the floor. No, he whispered. It is hers. The red candle turned toward Selene. Her father's name burned beneath it. Garin Mar. Then a second name appeared below his. Selene Mar. The red flame bent like a finger toward her heart. Malrek smiled through blood. Your father hid something in you too. The red candle pointed at Selene's heart. For one breath, even the dead seemed to wait. Selene stood in the hidden crypt beneath the Wolf Chapel, surrounded by extinguished white memory candles, with the Alpha King's hand still gripping hers, and Lord Regent Malrek smiling from the stone floor like a man who had found one last knife under the ashes. Her father's name burned beneath the red flame. Garin Mar, then Heirs. Selene Mar. The flame bent closer. Theron stepped in front of her at once. The red candle hissed. Not at him. Through him. Selene felt the heat pass straight into her chest, searching for something buried deeper than breath. Her grave flame seal burned beneath her eye. The wolf-shaped token in her palm pulsed once, then went cold. Theron's voice was rough. What did he hide in her? Malrek's smile widened. Ask the loyal dead. That is what you trust now, is it not? Selene stared at him. You know, I know Garen was cleverer than most traitors. The black-blue flame around her wrist snapped toward him. Malrek flinched, but his smile did not die. Careful, he whispered. If that red candle wakes fully, she may wish her father had left her nothing. The red flame pulsed again. A memory struck Selene so hard she nearly fell. Not a vision in the air. Inside her, she was 6 years old, kneeling in the courtyard while priests held her face still. The iron brand glowed white. The crowd watched. Malrek stood beside young Theron on the balcony, one hand on the boy's shoulder. But beneath the terror, beneath the pain of the brand touching her cheek, another hand had held hers. Her father's hand. Impossibly. Garen had already been dead. Yet in the memory, his voice whispered through the wolf token hidden in her fist. Do not let them make your pain empty. The brand struck. Selene screamed. And something passed from the token into the wound beneath her eye, not fire, not memory, but a lock. The vision released her. Selene gasped, hand flying to the old scar. Theron caught her by the shoulders. Selene. She could barely answer. The brand was not only punishment. The red candle brightened. It sealed something when they marked me. Malrek pushed himself up onto one elbow. Your father knew he would die. He knew the court would keep his daughter alive only if she was useful as shame. So he made your shame useful too. Theron turned on him. Speak plainly. Malrek laughed, hollow and bitter. Garen hid the king's final murderer where no one would search. Not in a tomb, not in a record. In his own child's wound. The crypt went silent. Selene's blood turned cold. No. The red candle bent closer. The flame touched the scar beneath her eye. Pain opened. This time, it did not burn like a brand. It opened like a door that had been locked from the inside for 15 years. Black-blue fire spilled down her cheek, and the crypt around her vanished into the night of King Osric's murder. She saw Garan dying at the crypt door, blood filling his mouth, young Theron unconscious behind him. Malrek stood over them with the white candle, but there was someone else in the chapel shadows. Not one of the masked killers. A woman in mourning white. Her veil hid her face. She knelt beside King Osric before he died and pressed 2 fingers to his lips, catching his final breath inside a red funeral candle. Osric's eyes found Garen. Not Malrek alone, the dying king rasped. The wolf who shared my crown. Garen's face went pale. The veiled woman looked up. The vision flickered before Selene could see her face. Garen crawled toward the fallen red candle, seized it, and pressed it into the wolf token. Then, with the last of his strength, he whispered toward the future. Selene. The memory shattered. Selene staggered backward. Theron held her, but she felt him shaking too. The wolf who shared my crown, he repeated. A terrible silence followed. Then one grave priest in the crypt whispered, the Luna Regent. Theron turned slowly. His mother had died 3 years after Osric. That was what the court histories said. Queen Isolde Vale, mourning widow, fragile after tragedy, gone to illness before Theron reached his 10th winter. Selene saw the look in Theron's eyes and hated the red candle for what it was about to do. Malrek's voice came softly from the floor. Now you understand why memory is mercy. Theron moved toward him, but Selene gripped his hand. Wait. He looked at her. His face was no longer only angry. It was breaking in places he had never allowed the world to see. The red candle floated from the iron tree and hovered between them. Its flame formed a path upward, back toward the wolf chapel. The final murderer was not in the crypt, only the first breath of the truth. They climbed in silence. Above, the graveyard waited in black and blue fire. The nobles had not left. Fear held them there more tightly than guards. Malrek was dragged after them, no longer smiling. Some part of him had wanted this truth buried too, which meant even his crimes had served someone else's shadow. Theron stopped before his mother's memorial stone near Osric's tomb. It was smaller than a ruler's grave. Elegant, white marble, covered in frost. Queen Isolde Vale, beloved Luna, faithful wife, grieving mother. The red candle floated to the inscription. The word faithful blackened first. Theron closed his eyes. Selene felt the grave flame ache inside her chest. Theron, do it, he said. His voice was barely sound. I can stop. No. He opened his eyes, and they were wet with grief he did not let fall. I have lived 15 years inside half-truths. Do not spare me the last one. Selene lifted her mage hen. The red candle sank into Queen Isolde's stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the memorial cracked from top to base. A red flame rose from within, carrying not Isolde's body, but her final loyalty. A vision formed over the grave. Queen Isolde stood in the wolf chapel on the night of the murder, veil lifted now. She was beautiful, pale, and calm, with eyes the same gold as Theron's. King Osric lay dying at her feet. You would make Garin guardian, she said. Osric's voice was ragged. Because Malrek wants the throne. And what do you think Garin wants? Isolde whispered. A guard with the love of your soldiers, a daughter with grave, flame blood, a prince who trusts him. You call that loyalty because it flatters you. Osric stared at her. What have you done? Isolde touched his face. What mothers do, she said. I chose who my son would survive. Then Malrek stepped from the shadows. Not commanding her, obeying her. The court gasped. Theron stood utterly still. The vision shifted. Isolde kissed young Theron's forehead as he lay unconscious, then looked at Malrek. He must never remember I was here. Malrek bowed his head. My Luna. The vision burned brighter. Isolde turned toward Garin, who was dying but still watching. If you speak my name through the fire, she said, your daughter burns with it. Garin smiled through blood. Then I will teach her fire how to wait. The vision vanished. The red candle went black. Theron did not move. No one dared breathe. At last, Selene understood the full shape of her father's sacrifice. Garin had hidden not only Malrek's guilt, but Isolde's, because revealing the queen too early would have killed Selene before she could survive the truth. Theron looked at Malrek. You served her. Malrek's voice was hoarse. I served the kingdom she preserved. My mother murdered my father. She saved you from becoming his pawn. Theron drew his sword. The grave flames surged. But Selene stepped beside him, not in front of him. This time, she would not block his rage. She only spoke quietly. If you kill him now, she remains a grieving queen in the histories. Theron's sword trembled. The red-black flame above Isolde's memorial opened like an eye. Inside it, Queen Isolde's voice whispered from death. My son belongs to the crown, not to the dead, not to truth, not to her. The flame turned towards Selene, and every grave in the royal cemetery began to open. Every grave in the royal cemetery began to open. Not all the way. Just enough for blue, black, and red fire to seep through the cracks like breath escaping sealed mouths. The ground trembled beneath Selene's feet. Stone wolves lifted their heads. Tomb lids shuddered. The old king's flames bent toward Queen Isolde's memorial, as if a dead Luna's command had dragged them from rest. My son belongs to the crown, not to the dead, not to truth, not to her. The words circled the graveyard like a curse wearing a mother's voice. Theron stood before his mother's cracked memorial, sword in hand, face stripped of every defense a king could wear. Selene saw the wound open in him, the child who had lost a father, the boy who had loved a mother, the young king shaped by Malrek, and the man now standing between the woman his mother wanted erased and the graveyard his mother had awakened. Malrek smiled through blood. Even dead, she protects you. The red-black flame above Isolde's memorial flared. A dead wolf lunged from an open tomb, its body made of blue fire and old bone shadow. It sprang not toward Theron, toward Selene. Theron moved first. His sword met the beast in midair, gold sparks tearing across blue flame. The impact drove him back 3 steps. His wound from the earlier struggle had reopened. Blood darkened his side beneath his black cloak. Selene lifted the grave flame token. "Rest," she commanded. The dead wolf paused. Then Isolde's flame lashed across it like a red whip. The beast screamed and lunged again. Selene understood with cold horror. The old grave seals were wounded. Isolde's final loyalty was using the opened tombs, twisting the royal dead into guardians of the lie. "The dead kings are not choosing this," she said. Theron's jaw tightened as he forced the wolf back. "Then tell me how to free them." The grave flame burned beneath her cheek. The answer came through pain. Her final loyalty must be read in full. Malrek laughed. "Read it then. Let the court hear a mother chose her son over a weak king." "No," Selene said, staring at the red-black flame. "Not what she claimed she chose, what she loved when she died." For the first time, Malrek's smile faltered. The difference mattered. Grave flame did not judge speeches. It read the last loyalty beneath them. Selene stepped toward Isolde's memorial. Theron caught her wrist. "If that flame turns on you, it already has." His fingers tightened, but he did not hold her back. He looked at her as if every instinct in him wanted to place himself between her and the grave. And every new truth he had learned tonight told him that protection without choice could become another cage. "Then I stand with you," he said. "Not in front of me." His mouth tightened. Then he stepped beside her. Together, they faced Queen Isolde's flame. The red-black fire rose higher, shaping itself into the image of the dead Luna. Beautiful, crowned in morning white, eyes cold with a mother's certainty. Around her, tomb flames bent like servants. "You would shame me before wolves who never knew the weight of a crown?" Isolde whispered. Theron's voice was hoarse. "I would know you." The dead queen's face flickered. Selene lifted the token. Final loyalty answers final flame. The black-blue fire from her palm struck the red candle. The cemetery vanished. They stood inside a death chamber washed in dawn-gray light. Queen Isolde lay in bed years after Osric's murder, thin and pale, not peaceful. Malrek knelt beside her. Young Theron slept in a chair near the window, one hand curled around nothing, as if even in sleep he searched for the token Malrek had buried from him. Isolde's breath rattled. Malrek whispered, "The boy loves you. He remembers nothing." Isolde looked at her sleeping son. For one moment, grief cracked her beauty. Then fear entered. "He has Osric's eyes," she said. "One day he will look at me and know." "He cannot. I sealed it. Seals fail. Blood remembers. Fire remembers. The dead are patient." Malrek bowed his head. "Then give me leave to finish the Mar girl. She carries Garen's line." Isolde closed her eyes. Selene stopped breathing. After all these years, her death had been discussed beside a sleeping child's chair. "No," Isolde whispered. Malrek looked up. "She lives," Isolde said. "If you kill her, the grave fire may wake too soon. Let shame bury what blades cannot. Let her grow small under the name Traitor's daughter. A living disgrace is safer than a martyr." The words struck Selene like a hand around the throat. Her survival had not been mercy. It had been strategy. Isolde turned her face toward young Theron again. "If truth comes," she whispered, "make him choose the crown. Make him believe love is obedience. Make him fear any woman who asks to be seen." The room darkened. The final breath came. Selene felt the grave flame lean close. Here. This was the last loyalty. Isolde's dying eyes fixed not on her son, not on the crown at the bedside, not on Malrek, on a silver mirror beside the bed. In it, her reflection wore Osric's crown. "My reign," she breathed. Then she died. The vision shattered. The graveyard returned in a storm of fire. Queen Isolde's red-black flame screamed. The court had seen. Theron had seen. His mother's final loyalty had not been him. It had been power. The dead wolves turned from Selene. One by one, their burning heads swung toward Isolde's memorial. The red flame tried to rise, to command, to lash, but the blue grave fires closed around it. Selene lifted the token with both hands, though her arms shook. "Queen Isolde Vale," she said, voice breaking but clear. "Your grief is witnessed. Your murder is witnessed. Your lie is witnessed." Theron stepped beside her, blood on his sword, grief in his face, and no softness left for the lie. "And your command over me ends now." The red flame collapsed inward. Isolde's memorial split open, revealing not bones, but a hidden crown of blackened silver buried beneath the stone. The false mourning crown. Malrek lunged with a cry. Theron struck him down with the flat of his blade before he reached it. Selene picked up the crown. It was cold, heavy, and engraved inside with names. Not kings, regents. Malrek's name was the last. The court understood then. Isolde and Malrek had not only murdered Osric to control Theron, they had built a hidden line of rule beneath the mourning rites. The black grave candles bent toward the crown. Selene looked at Theron. "This is the root." His eyes held hers. "Then burn it." She placed the false crown on Osric's tomb. The grave flame rose from her palm, black blue and steady, and consumed it without smoke. Every opened grave fell silent. Every dead wolf bowed once and returned to rest. Malrek, bleeding in the frost, stared at the ash where his secret reign had died. Theron faced him, not as the child he had shaped, as the king he had failed to own. "Tell me where the regent's records are," Theron said. Malrek spat blood onto the snow. "You will destroy your own court." Theron looked at Selene, then at the tombs, then at Garin Mar's name, still burning above his father's grave. "No," he said, "I will bury the one that was already dead." Beneath Osric's tomb, a hidden stair opened, and from below rose the smell of old parchment, royal seals, and 15 years of stolen rule. The hidden stair beneath King Osric's tomb descended into a chamber no mourning bell had ever named. Theron went first. Selene followed close behind, grave flame still burning beneath the mark on her cheek, her palm wrapped around Garin Mar's wolf token. Behind them, guards dragged Malrek in chains of blue funeral fire. He no longer looked like the loyal regent who had ruled the court's grief for 15 years. Without the white fur mantle, without the gold mourning chain, without the calm voice that had taught a kingdom how to hate a dead man, he looked smaller. Not harmless. Never harmless. Only exposed. The chamber below was lined with shelves of black oak. Scrolls filled every wall. Royal seals hung from iron hooks. White candles burned above ledgers bound in wolfskin, each flame thin and steady, as if waiting to be read by someone who could no longer be frightened away. At the center stood a stone table. Upon it lay a book with a blackened silver crown stamped into the cover. The Regent book. Selene knew before anyone opened it. This was not only a record of Osric's murder, it was a record of every hand that had ruled through Theron while calling him king. Theron placed his palm on the cover. The book did not open. The white candles flickered. Selene stepped beside him and placed Garin's token on the table. The book opened by itself. Names filled the first page. Malrek Valethorn, Queen Isolde Vale, Lord Halev of Thornridge, Priest Vare of the Mourning House, Lady Myra, Captain Othric. Beneath them were payments, titles, marriage promises, land grants, military commands, and sealed orders written before King Osric died. The murder had not been a moment of panic. It had been planned like inheritance. Theron read in silence. Selene watched him lose the last mercy of ignorance. One page showed the order to frame Garin Mar. Another described Selene as the remaining grave flame risk. A third recorded the brand placed beneath her eye, not as punishment, but as containment. Her life had been measured in ink by people who had never heard her cry. Theron turned the final page. There, in Malrek's hand, was the line that made the king go utterly still. If the boy resists, deepen the memory rites. If the Mar girl survives into womanhood, use her shame to renew his hatred. Selene felt the words strike him. Not because they hurt her, because they showed him how long he had been used to hurt her. Malrek laughed softly from the stair. You wanted records. There they are. Burn them, and the houses will call them forgeries. Keep them, and half your court becomes enemy by dawn. Theron looked up. No, he said. They became enemies when they signed. He lifted the regent book. The white candles bent toward it, but did not burn. Selene understood. The dead will not destroy witness. Theron looked at her. Then how do we carry it? She looked at the white candles, the black-blue flame on her wrist, and the token her father had died to place in his child's hand. Not we, she said. Everyone. She pressed her bleeding palm to the regent book. The grave flame entered the pages. Not consuming, copying. Every word lifted from the book as black-blue fire and rose through the tomb ceiling into the cemetery above. The records spread across the winter sky, written in flame large enough for every noble, guard, priest, and servant to read. The court saw the names, the payments, the murder order, the memory rights, the order to brand Selene, the lie that made Garin Mar a traitor. The graveyard erupted. Some nobles ran, some shouted denial, some tore off family brooches as if removing gold could remove guilt. Priests fell to their knees as the dead wolves carved into the tombs opened their stone mouths and breathed blue fire over every written name. Theron emerged from the tomb chamber with the regent book in his hands. Selene came beside him. Malrek was dragged after them, his face gray. The Alpha King stood before Osric's tomb, beneath the flaming records of his own court, and took off his silver-thorn crown. The graveyard fell silent. Theron placed the crown on his father's tomb. I was crowned over a buried memory, he said. Tonight, that memory stands. No one moved. Garin Mar is restored as loyal captain of the King's Guard. Selene Mar is stripped of no name, no right, no breath, by the lie placed on her blood. Every house named in the regent book will answer before grave witness. Every mourning rite used to bind memory is forbidden from this night onward. A nobleman shouted, You will break the court. Theron's gold eyes turned toward him. The court broke when it murdered a king and raised a child on a lie. The noble went silent. Malrek lifted his head. And what of me, little king? The old name struck the air like poison. Theron's hand tightened on his sword. Selene felt it, the desire to kill him. Quick, clean, hot enough to end the night with blood instead of procedure. She would not have blamed him. But she also felt the dead waiting. Theron did too. He looked at Selene. Not for permission, for witness. She nodded once. Theron faced Malrek. You will not die by my anger. Malrek smiled faintly. Mercy? No. The black grave candles rose behind Theron. You stole memories, he said, so you will keep all of them. Malrek's smile faded. Theron lifted the wolf-shaped grave token from Selene's palm and pressed it against Malrek's chest. The grave flame answered. Every memory stolen from Theron, every moment of Garen's loyalty, every scream sealed beneath the chapel, every name in the regent book, every lie Malrek fed a grieving child poured into the regent at once. Malrek screamed. He collapsed before Osric's tomb, clutching his head as 15 years of buried truth entered him without mercy. Theron looked down at him. You will live as keeper of the records you tried to erase. Every year, on the night of graves, you will speak Garin Mar's name first. If you lie, the dead will correct you. The grave candles flared black in agreement. For the first time, Malrek had no answer. By dawn, the mourning garden had changed. The traitor's brand beneath Selene's eye no longer looked like a wound. It burned softly black-blue, a grave flame seal recognized by every royal tomb. Garin Mar's name was restored above King Osric's grave, carved into black stone beside the words, Loyal beyond death. Servants came first to see it, then guards, then old soldiers who had served under her father and had been silent too long. One by one, they bowed their heads before Selene, not as apology enough, never that, but as the first trembling shape of a truth that would take years to live honestly. Theron stood several steps away, crownless, his black cloak moving in the pale morning wind. You should rest, he said. Selene looked at him. So should you. I doubt either of us will. For the first time that night, something almost like a smile touched her mouth. It faded quickly. Too much had happened for softness to stay long. Theron saw it and did not chase it. That mattered. He looked toward Garen's restored name. I hated him because they taught me to. I know. I let them make you carry that hatred. Yes, the honesty hurt. But it also kept the ground solid beneath them. Theron turned back to her. I cannot ask forgiveness for a life built around your shame. No, Selene said. You cannot. He nodded. No defense. No royal argument. Only acceptance. Then he lowered himself to one knee before her in the frost, not as a king choosing a woman, not as a man claiming redemption through her pain, but as a son kneeling before the daughter of the man who had saved him. The graveyard watched. So did the dead. Selene Mar, he said, voice rough. Your father carried me when I could not run. You carried my truth when I could not remember. I will spend my reign making sure neither burden is buried again. Her throat tightened. The grave flame warmed beneath her cheek. And what do you want from me? She asked. Theron lifted his eyes to hers. Nothing you do not choose. That answer nearly broke her because it was the first gift no one had tried to wrap in debt. Selene looked at the grave candles. They no longer bowed as if worshipping her. They burned steady, blue and black together, loyal to truth rather than comfort. At last, she held out Garen's wolf token. Theron did not take it. He placed his hand beneath hers, supporting it instead. Together, they set the token on King Osric's tomb. The black flame rose once, then softened into blue. From somewhere beyond the cemetery wall, the first wolves of mourning howled. Not in grief, not in accusation. In witness, Selene stood beside crownless Alpha King as dawn touched the graves of the dead, and for the first time since childhood, no one called her Traitor's daughter. They called her by her name, Selene Mar, Gravi Flame Heir, keeper of the final loyalty.